Amara Cole was born on a Thursday in November, when the sky outside St. Mary's Hospital was the color of an old bruise and the bare trees stood like dark stitches along the road. Her mother, Clara, always told that story every birthday, how the nurses had gone quiet when Amara came out, not because something was wrong, but because the baby didn't cry. She just opened her eyes. Dark eyes, almost black at the center, ringed with something faintly silver that the nurses chalked up to the fluorescent lighting and wrote nothing about in their charts. Adrian Cole had stood at the foot of the bed with his arms crossed and an expression on his face that Clara later described as watching something he hadn't fully decided about yet. He was beautiful in the way that made people uncomfortable, too sharp at the cheekbones, too still in a room full of motion, skin that never quite looked warm even when it was. He had kissed Amara's forehead, called her incredible, and then gone to stand by the window for the rest of the night with his back to both of them. Clara had held her daughter alone. That was the beginning of everything. Amara's earliest memory of her father was his hands. Not his face, not his voice, his hands. Long-fingered and cool to the touch no matter the season, the kind of cool that didn't feel like a person's hands should feel. She remembered being 4 or 5, sitting in his lap while he read something on his laptop, and pressing her small palm against the back of his hand just to feel how different it was. He had looked down at her, something flickering in his expression, and said, "You have my hands, little one." She had looked at her own hands. Small and brown from Clara's side of the family, warm and soft. She did not have his hands. But she had understood, even at 5, that he was trying to give her something by saying it. Some thread of connection he didn't know how to sew properly. Adrian Cole was a damper, though Amara would not know that word for many years. Half human, half vampire, the product of a union that neither world fully endorsed. He moved through the human world wearing a very convincing costume of ordinariness. He ate food, drank coffee, worked a job, a night security consultant for a firm whose clients Amara never knew, and came home before dawn with the faint smell of cold air on his coat. He was not cruel to Clara. He was not cruel to Amara. He was simply not quite present, the way a photograph of a person is not quite the same as the person. There were signs, if you knew to look. Amara did not know to look. She was a child. She noticed that the neighborhood dogs never barked at her father, they went silent when he passed, the frantic, throat-deep silence of animals deciding something. She noticed that he never wore short sleeves, even in July when the apartment sweated and the fans did nothing. She noticed that his eyes, brown in indoor light, went darker than dark outside at night, not red, not golden like in the movies, just a depth that shouldn't be there, a depth that felt like looking at something very old wearing a young man's face. She noticed that when she scraped her knee once, climbing the back fence on a dare from the boy next door, and the blood ran down to her ankle, her father had been across the yard in the time it takes to blink. He had wrapped her leg in his jacket before she'd finished gasping. His hands had been shaking. She'd thought he was scared for her. Later she would understand he'd been scared of himself. The Cole family lived in a gray brick row house in Cincinnati, Ohio, on a street where everyone knew everyone's business and nobody asked about the ones they didn't understand. Clara worked as a school librarian. She made the kind of home that smelled like paper and cinnamon and whatever casserole had been in the oven the night before. She was small and warm and laughed with her whole body, and she had loved Adrian Cole with a completeness that Amara, watching them as a child, had sometimes found slightly embarrassing to witness. Clara had known something was different about him. She had asked, once, early in their relationship. He had told her something, not the whole truth, never the whole truth, some abbreviated version that satisfied her enough to love him anyway. Clara had the kind of love that ran toward difficult things instead of away from them. It was one of her finest qualities and, in the end, one of the things that hurt her most. Adrian was present for Amara's first years with the kind of intensity that came in streaks. He would be there, fully there, teaching her to read, walking her to the park, lying on the living room floor doing puzzles with her, for weeks at a time. And then, something would shift, some internal tide, and he would begin to disappear in increments. First just quieter. Then, working longer hours. Then, sleeping in the second bedroom, which they called the office, because Clara had stopped asking him to come to bed and Amara had stopped asking why he wasn't. Amara was 7 the first time she heard her parents fight behind a closed door. Not the words, just the frequencies of it, her mother's voice cracking at the edges, her father's voice a flat, low thing like a door that won't open no matter how hard you push. She sat on the stairs in her pajamas and held her stuffed rabbit, whose name was George, and decided very firmly that everything was fine. She was good at deciding things were fine. By the time Amara was 9, she had started noticing things about herself that she filed away under the category of strange but not scary. She could see better in the dark than most people could in daylight, not just see, but read the dark, understand what was in it from 20 yards away. Her friends had once dared her to walk through Mrs. Patterson's unlit backyard at midnight, and she had done it without hesitating, stepping around the flower pots and the sprinkler head and the dog bowl she had no way of knowing was there, and her friends had stared at her with a mixture of admiration and something else that she didn't have a name for yet. She ran faster than she should have. Not supernaturally, nothing movie dramatic, just consistently faster than other kids, faster than the gym teacher's expectations, fast enough that her middle school coach had started talking about track scholarships before Amara was 11. She healed fast. Bruises that should have lasted a week were gone in 2 days. A broken wrist from a fall off her bike, truly broken, the ER doctor had shown them the x-ray with a kind of sorry about this expression, had healed in 3 weeks when they had told her 6. The doctor had called it remarkable bone density. Clara had said, well, she's always been tough. Adrian had said nothing, but he had looked at Amara's wrist on the drive home with that same expression from the hospital the day she was born, evaluating, deciding. Later that night, Amara had found him standing at the window of the kitchen at 2 a.m, not getting anything, not doing anything, just standing with his hands loose at his sides and his face turned toward the dark. She had asked him if he was okay. He had turned and looked at her like she had woken him from somewhere far away. I don't know, he had said. It was the most honest thing she would ever hear from him. Adrian left the summer Amara turned 12. He did not do it the way she would later see in movies, where the father slams the door and the mother cries at the kitchen table and the child watches from the stairs. He did it gradually, the way a tide goes out, so slowly that by the time you notice the water is gone, it's been gone for hours and you just hadn't been paying attention. First it was 3 nights a week away. Then, 5. Then, he came home one Sunday in June with a careful expression and sat down across from Clara at the dining table and said something Amara wasn't in the room for. She had been upstairs, supposed to be doing summer reading, but actually just lying on her bed staring at the water stain on the ceiling that had always looked like a running horse. She heard her mother say no 3 times. She heard silence. She heard the front door. Then, her mother did not come upstairs for a long time. Amara read 40 pages of her book without understanding a single sentence. Then, she went downstairs and found Clara at the kitchen table with her hands around a cold cup of coffee and her eyes somewhere else entirely. Is Dad coming back? Clara had looked at her. For a moment her face did something complicated and terrible, the kind of expression that happens when an adult realizes they cannot protect a child from something that has already arrived. I don't think so, baby. Amara had nodded. She had gone back upstairs. She had pressed her face into George the rabbit and had not cried, because she had the sudden, strange, absolute conviction that if she started she would not stop for a very long time, and she did not have time for that. She did not cry for 8 years. The months after Adrian left were the kind that Amara would look back on later and understand as formative in the most brutal sense, the months that built the architecture of who she was going to be, laid down the load-bearing walls and the places where things would crack. Clara fell apart quietly. She kept going to work, kept feeding Amara, kept the lights on, but something behind her eyes went to a lower wattage and stayed there. She stopped laughing with her whole body. She started laughing at half volume, with one part of her face, while the other part stayed somewhere else. Amara watched this and filed it under fine and went to school and came home and made dinner on the nights when Clara was still in her work clothes at 7 p.m. and hadn't moved from the couch. She learned to make 4 things that year: pasta, omelets, soup from a can, and a very particular kind of silence that did not ask anything of anyone. She made friends the way water finds cracks, not by seeking them out but by filling the spaces available. Lena Marsh became her best friend by the simple mechanism of sitting next to her in 6th grade homeroom and refusing to leave. Lena was loud where Amara was quiet, warm where Amara was careful, the kind of person who said I love you to her friends with zero hesitation and meant it every single time. She had recognized something in Amara that first week, not the sadness, not the father-shaped hole, but the intelligence, the dry humor that appeared in small doses like a rare weather event, the way Amara watched people. You see everything Lena had told her once, in 7th grade. It's kind of weird, actually, thanks, Amara had said. It was a compliment, I know, Lena had stayed. That was the thing about Lena, she stayed. Adrian sent a card for Amara's 13th birthday. A store-bought one, blue and generic, with a horse on it for no reason she could determine. He had signed it Love, Dad, and included a $50 bill that Clara had given directly to Amara without a word. Amara had put the 50 in her desk drawer and taped the card to the inside of her closet door, facing inward, where she could see it when she opened the closet, but it wasn't visible to anyone who walked into her room. She was not sure why she kept it. She was not sure why that mattered. The cards came every birthday for 4 years, then stopped. She noticed when they stopped. She told herself she didn't. High school was the period during which Amara Cole became someone armor-plated and interesting. She was not popular in the conventional sense she didn't want to be, she had no patience for the social architecture of who was talking to whom and what that meant. But she had a reputation for being honest in a way that somehow did not make people angry, and for being the person other people came to when something was actually wrong, when the thing they needed was someone who would sit with them in the problem without trying to paper over it with reassurances. She ran track and held 2 school records. She read constantly. She got into arguments with her history teacher about primary sources and her English teacher about whether ambiguity was a flaw or a feature of a text, and she was right on both counts, and the teachers, being good ones, told her so. She did not date. She came close once, a boy named Daniel, junior year, who was kind and funny and looked at her like she was something worth looking at, but the second time he tried to hold her hand she had felt a contraction in her chest like a cold fist closing, and she had found a reason to walk home alone and avoided his eyes in the hallway for 2 weeks until he got the message and stopped trying. She didn't examine that response. There was a whole room inside her she had locked and wasn't ready to enter. Clara recovered. It was slow and uneven, and there were months in Amara's sophomore year when the lights went back to half wattage without warning, but Clara had a therapist by then, and a book club and a friend named Joyce who came over every Friday with wine and a complete inability to sit quietly, and piece by piece Clara Voss rebuilt herself into someone who wasn't defined by what Adrian had walked away from. She never spoke badly about Adrian to Amara. She could have, she had every reason to, she had the raw materials for it, years of them, but she didn't. She said, once, when Amara was 16 and had asked directly, he loved us. He just didn't know how to stay anywhere, and then, quieter, that's not about you, baby. I need you to understand that, Amara had nodded. She did not understand it yet. She understood the words. The part underneath the words that was going to take longer. At 18, Amara got a scholarship to the University of Cincinnati and studied pre-nursing because she wanted to do something that mattered and because she was good at being calm inside chaos, which is more than half of what that job requires. She moved into the dorms and called Clara every Sunday and visited Lena, who'd gone to Ohio State, every few months. She was, by any measure, doing fine. The abilities she'd cataloged since childhood had settled into a new configuration in her late teens. The night vision had deepened, she could see color in complete darkness now, which she tested methodically in her dorm room with the blackout curtains drawn and a piece of paper with colored markers on it, and she'd sat with the results of that test for a long time without deciding what to do about them. Her speed was more controllable, like a gear she could shift into when she needed it. Her body temperature ran a degree or 2 low. She'd told her doctor, who had run tests and found nothing and suggested she wear more layers. She wore more layers. There was one other thing. Not something she'd had as a child, something that arrived in her first year of nursing school and built steadily after that. She could feel people. Not feel for them, not empathy, though she had that too, more than was comfortable sometimes, but feel them physically, like a frequency. In a crowded room she could tell who was sick before they showed symptoms, could feel it as a kind of interference in the air between them, a subtle wrongness. She had learned to trust it because it had been right every time. Lena, when Amara finally told her on a Sunday call junior year, had said, "Okay, but have you considered that you might be a little bit magic?" "I've considered it, and I've decided not to make it weird, it's already weird, Amara, I know. I'm managing it, She graduated with honors, took a position at Cincinnati General in the night shift ER, because of course she took the night shift, her body was built for it, the hours between midnight and dawn were when she was most herself, and moved into a one-bedroom apartment near the river that she furnished slowly and deliberately, each piece chosen rather than accumulated. She was 22. She was doing fine, she told herself, and most days it was true, and the days it wasn't true she was good enough at the silence to get through them without letting anyone see the difference. Lena visited for a long weekend in October and slept on the couch and ate cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row and dragged Amara to a concert at a venue near campus, and Amara had stood at the back of the crowd and watched Lena dance and felt something she couldn't quite name, not envy, not unhappiness, just the particular awareness of a space that was shaped like a thing she didn't have. She drove home after and sat in her car in the parking garage for 11 minutes before going inside. The space had a name. She was not ready to say it. It started with the man in Bay 4. Late November, a Tuesday, 2 in the morning. A man had been brought in by ambulance from a car accident on I-71, no other vehicle, single car, his sedan wrapped around a guardrail at a speed that should have produced much more damage than it had. The paramedics were confused. The car was destroyed. The man had a broken arm and a laceration across his forehead, and that was all. Amara had been assigned his intake. She had walked into Bay 4, looked at the man sitting upright on the gurney with his broken arm and a temporary splint and his forehead still bleeding, and felt the frequency hit her like a physical impact. Not illness. Not distress. Something else, something so loud and wrong and other that she had stopped in the doorway and put one hand on the frame. He was not human. She didn't know how she knew that. She had no framework for knowing it. But the certainty was absolute and structural, the way you know the difference between wood and metal by the sound it makes when you knock on it. The man had looked at her. His eyes were dark, ringed with silver, almost imperceptibly, at the edges. She had recognized that ring. She had seen it in her own mirror. "You're different, he had said. Not a question. He said it the way you say it's cold when you step outside, confirming a fact that requires no interpretation. "So are you, she had said. His name was Marcus. He was a vampire. She had pulled that word out of some deep knowledge she'd never consciously learned and found it fit perfectly, the way a word you've heard your whole life in another language and suddenly understand. He was a vampire, and he was in her ER, and the reason the accident had not killed him was the same reason it would not kill any of his kind. They had talked for 40 minutes after she'd sutured his forehead. She had asked the questions she had spent 22 years not letting herself ask, because asking them would make the answers real, and she had not been ready for real. She was ready now. Marcus had answered carefully but honestly. He told her what she was, what the quarter of her that came from Adrian meant, what it produced, what she was capable of. He told her that there were others. That there was a world adjacent to the one she lived in, running parallel to it, and that she had been living on the border her whole life without knowing the border had a name. He told her that people had been watching her. Who, she asked. He hesitated for the first time. Someone who knew your father, he said. And who has been keeping an eye on what he left behind. The words landed wrong. Not the watching, she had suspected something like that, on the low level of intuition she'd learned to trust. The phrase. What he left behind, the easiness of it, the shorthand of it, as if she were inventory. Marcus had seen her face change and had backtracked, that was a poor choice of words. He would not describe you that way, who, he had given her a name. Dorian Voss. It meant nothing to her then. The name of a stranger, nothing more. She had written it on the inside of her wrist in the same pen she used for patient notes, because she'd had nothing else nearby, and she had covered it with her sleeve before she went back to the floor. It sat against her skin for the rest of the shift. 2 weeks after the conversation with Marcus, Amara found a card in her mailbox. Not her hospital mailbox, her home mailbox, at the building by the river, which had a security code and was on the third floor and which no one except Lena and Clara had the address for. The envelope was cream-colored and slightly heavy, the kind of paper that cost more than paper should cost. Her name was written on the front in a hand that was extremely controlled and extremely old, the handwriting of someone who had learned before ballpoints, before keyboards, before the cultural drift away from penmanship. Inside was a single card. No store graphics, no greeting. Just a line, handwritten, "You have questions. I have answers. The choice is yours." Below that, an address. Not local, a town about 40 miles east, somewhere in the hills outside the city, somewhere she would have had no reason to go. Below the address, initialed D.V., she stood at her mailbox in her scrubs at 7 in the morning with the November wind coming off the river and held the card for a long time. She was angry, the way she always got angry when something made her afraid, reaching for that familiar, useful thing. Angry at the presumption of it. Angry at the certainty behind it, the absolute confidence that she would not take this card and throw it away and go back upstairs and make coffee and live her life unchanged. She was also not going to throw it away. She knew that the second she read it. She went upstairs. She made coffee. She looked at the address for 3 days. She called Clara and did not mention any of it, and she called Lena and got halfway through mentioning it before stopping and pivoting to asking about Lena's job, because saying it out loud would make it something she had to decide, and she was still in the part where she was pretending she hadn't already decided. On the 4th day she got in her car. It was a Sunday. Gray and cold, the kind of cold that doesn't commit to snow but doesn't let go of the thread either. She drove east out of the city with the heater on and the radio off, watching the landscape open up from concrete and commercial strips into fields gone brown and hills that looked like they were keeping something in. The address led her to a road she wouldn't have found if she hadn't been looking, unmarked, pressed between 2 old pines that had grown together overhead in an arch, the kind of entrance that was architectural without advertising itself. The road wound for about half a mile through what must have been grounds, though the word felt small for what she was looking at: old trees, deliberate distances, the kind of landscape that had been managed for a very long time. The building at the end of it was not what she'd expected. She hadn't known what to expect, but it wasn't this, not a castle, nothing theatrical, no turrets or Gothic stonework. It was a house that had been added to over what looked like several centuries, each addition made in the style of its time but fitted to what came before with a coherence that felt less like architecture and more like something biological. It was large without being ostentatious. It was clearly, unambiguously old. It was also lit. Warm light in the windows, the ordinary domestic kind. Someone had left a pair of boots by the front door. She sat in her car in the gravel drive for 4 minutes. She was afraid. She reached for the anger, found it waiting, and climbed out of the car. The door opened before she reached it. The man in the doorway was. She would spend a long time later trying to describe this to herself, because the easy descriptions all failed. He was tall, dark-haired, with the kind of face that had been assembled with a precision that felt intentional. Not handsome in the soft-jawed, obvious way. Handsome in the way of something that has been through a great deal and come out the other side of it shaped rather than worn down. His eyes were dark. No silver ring. Something she didn't recognize yet moved through her, fast and uncomfortable, like a current finding a path. He looked at her the way you look at something you've been waiting a long time to see. Not possessively. Not predatorily. With a quiet attention that had weight to it, the kind of attention that costs something to give. Amara, he said. Her name in his voice, and nothing else yet. She stared at him. You've been watching me, she said, because it was the thing that mattered, the thing she needed to be on the table before anything else. Yes, why, he stepped back from the door, opening it fully. Come in and, I'll tell you, she should have been more cautious. She understood that, abstractly. But, the anger was a good enough anchor, and the need to know, the 22-year accumulation of questions she'd taught herself not to ask, was louder than caution. She walked in. The door closed behind her. Outside, the November sky had finally made its decision about snow and had started, slowly and without announcement, to let it fall. The inside of the house smelled like old wood and something Amara didn't have a name for, not incense, not flowers, more mineral than that, the smell of stone that has been warmed for a very long time. There were bookshelves. That was the first thing she noticed past the entry, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in a room to the left, not decorative, not staged for the impression of being well-read, but used, the kind of shelves where books are pulled out and put back in the wrong places because they're constantly being reached for. She noticed that because it was the kind of thing she noticed. Because noticing objects was still, at 22, her emergency exit from feelings. Dorian Voss led her through the entry hall and into a room that had been someone's study for what looked like several hundred years, a fire in the fireplace, 2 chairs that hadn't been new in any decade she could name, a desk with the organized chaos of someone who worked there seriously and, often. He gestured to one of the chairs. She sat on the edge of it, not leaning back, spine straight, arms loose in her lap. Ready to leave quickly. He sat across from her and did not do the thing she'd half expected, did not immediately begin to manage her, did not perform reassurance or warmth, did not try to make the situation less charged by pretending it wasn't. He simply looked at her. Ask asterisk, he said. So she did. She asked everything. The questions she'd taped over with Fine for 22 years came out in an order that surprised her, not chronological, not thematic, just the order they surfaced in, which was its own kind of honesty. What was her father? What that made her? What the abilities meant, the night vision, the speed, the healing, the frequency sense she'd been quietly cataloging since she was in high school. Whether there were others like her. Whether the people watching her were a threat. Dorian answered everything. His voice was measured and low, and he did not editorialize. He did not offer comfort or context, he just laid the information flat and let her pick it up and hold it at whatever distance she needed. It was, she realized partway through, the same approach she used with patients when they'd been given news that was going to change the shape of their life, not rushing them, not filling silences that they needed empty. She recognized it as care. She put it in a box and closed the box. This is what she learned in that first hour. Dhampirs, half vampire, half human, were not especially rare, but they were largely unrecognized because they almost always lived in the human world by choice and by necessity. The vampire community had complicated feelings about them, ranging from protective to dismissive to, in some circles, something less charitable than either. Adrian Cole had been born a Dhampir to a vampire father he had never met and a human mother who had died when he was 16. He had spent his adult life at the edge of both worlds, accepted by neither, belonging to neither, which produced a particular kind of damage in a person that Amara did not need explained. She understood that kind of damage the way she understood her own skeleton. Amara herself was what was called a quarter-blood. One grandparent vampire in her line, the abilities diluted but present, more stable than a Dhampir's divided nature, less complete than a full vampire's. She would not age the way her human peers would. She would not need what full vampires needed. She was something in between, which had been the story of her family for 2 generations now. Did he know? She asked. What I was, yes, Dorian said. The fire made a sound. The room was very still. He didn't say anything. No, not to me, not to my mother. No, he paused. I cannot tell you why he made that choice. Only that he made it. She looked at the fire for a while. It was a usable anger, the kind she could carry without it breaking anything. You said you've been watching me. Who authorized that? I did it. Why? He was quiet for a moment in a way that was not evasion, more like he was measuring how much truth to give and, then, deciding to give all of it. Because your father left. And, because what he left behind, you, specifically, deserved to not be left completely alone in something she didn't know she was in the middle of. She waited for the phrase to land wrong again, the way it had when Marcus said it. It didn't. Coming from him it was different, not inventory, not logistics. Something that sounded like it had been thought about. I didn't ask for a guardian, she said. No. I didn't tell you I was one. That was a choice I'm prepared to defend. She looked at him. Defend it. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, but the bones of one. You're here. You came. You spent 22 years in a world you didn't fully belong to because no one gave you the other half. I didn't tell you because you weren't ready, and I could tell when you were based on what Marcus she sat with that. He had sent Marcus, or Marcus's accident had been an opportunity, she wasn't sure which. That car accident, real accident, he said. I don't manufacture things. But, when it happened and he ended up in your hospital, I let it run in that's still a kind of manipulation, yes, she had expected him to argue or qualify. He didn't. The yes sat there bare and undefended, and somehow that made it harder to be angry about. She went home that Sunday and did not sleep. She lay in her bed in her Cincinnati apartment by the river and looked at the ceiling and allowed herself to think about her father, something she had a practice of not doing, a long-standing, well-maintained avoidance. She thought about his cool hands. She thought about the dogs going silent. She thought about his face at the hospital window the night she was born, evaluating and apart. She thought about being 12, in the house with Clara, listening to the frequency of a fight she couldn't parse. She had built her whole adult architecture on not asking. On the find that she said to herself enough times that it had mostly become structural, load-bearing. On the silence she'd perfected at 11 while making pasta for dinner because Clara had forgotten to turn the stove on. And here was a man who had just handed her the other half of what she was, like furniture that had been in storage that she hadn't known belonged to her. Like, here, this is yours, you were always supposed to have it. She was not grateful. Not yet. She was the thing before grateful, the raw, strange, disorienting thing that happens when an absence gets a shape. She called Lena at 6 in the morning, which Lena would forgive and had forgiven before. I found out what my dad was, she said. Lena was quiet for 4 seconds. For Lena, that was a geological era. Okay. Do I need to come over, no? I just needed to say it out loud, what was he, Amara told her. All of it. Lena listened without interrupting, which was another thing she would do for Amara that she would not do for many people. So you're a little bit vampire, Lena said at the end. Quarter. Apparently, does that mean I should stop making you try new brunch spots, Lena, too soon? I'll circle back, Amara laughed. Once, short, surprised. It broke something loose in her chest. I need to go back, she said. To his house. I think I need to go back, then, go back, it's complicated, all things worth doing are. You know that. You're literally the person who told me that, she had told Lena that, actually. Sophomore year of high school. In a different context entirely. That Lena had kept it and given it back to her now was so precisely what Lena did, so exactly the kind of friend she was, that Amara felt it like pressure behind her eyes. Thank you, she said. Obviously. Go back. Call me after, she went back. She went back the next Sunday, and the Sunday after that, and by the third visit the conversations had shifted from information transfer to something less defined and more complicated. Dorian was not warm in the easy, accessible way. He did not tell stories about himself, he did not ask questions about her life that felt like territory marking. He was interested in her thoughts, specifically, in what she made of things, and that was a different kind of attention from being interested in her. She was careful with it. She was careful with him. But she went back. The house, she learned its name was Voss Hall, which she found deeply funny and said so, and Dorian had looked at her with a slight, contained amusement that was the equivalent, she suspected, of full laughter from someone else, was the center of what she began to understand as a court. Not in the theatrical sense. Not cloaks and thrones and blood from goblets. A community, organized and old, with relationships and hierarchies and political structures as complex as anything in the human world, and considerably more durable because the people in it did not die on human schedules. Dorian led it. Had led it for longer than she initially understood, long enough that the word king didn't feel like a title so much as a description, the same way the word mountain isn't a title, just what a thing is when it's been shaped by that much time and pressure. She met others in those weeks. Marcus, who she already knew, and who treated her with a respectful wariness she appreciated. A woman named Sophia who had Dorian's ear on political matters and who looked at Amara from their first meeting with an expression Amara recognized immediately as the sophisticated adult version of "I saw him first," a young-looking man named Eli who was in fact older than the city of Cincinnati and who found everything Amara said extremely funny in a way she couldn't always explain. She liked Eli. She was cautious about Sophia. She was comfortable with Marcus in the way you're comfortable with someone who already knows what you are and skipped the surprise stage. And Dorian. She was not ready to name what she was with Dorian. She was aware that not naming it was itself a kind of naming, but she was managing that contradiction by not looking at it directly. 6 weeks in, she was on her 4th Sunday visit when Dorian told her something he'd been holding. They had been in the library, the real library, not the study, a room that required a separate wing and a temperature regulation system and that Amara had, on her 2nd visit, stood in the doorway of for a full minute before entering and she had been reading something about Dhampir historical record while he worked at the large table in the center of the room, and she had felt before he said anything that the quality of the silence had changed. She looked up. He was watching her with that full attention again, the kind that cost something. "There's something you should know, asterisk," he said. "Okay, asterisk, your father is alive." "You knew that, asterisk, yes, asterisk, he's not in Cincinnati, asterisk, a pause. Asterisk, he's been living in London for the past 4 years. He built a new life, asterisk, she put the book down. With an asterisk, a woman. Another Dhampir, actually. They have a son. Theodore. He's 8 asterisk, the fire in the library's hearth made it sound. She looked at it. Theodore. 8 years old. Her half-brother, or something in the vicinity of half-brother, a calculation she hadn't had to make before this moment, hadn't had the components for. Her father had a son named Theodore who was 8, which meant he had been born 2 years after Adrian left Cincinnati, 2 years after he sat down at the dining table and said something to Clara that made her say no 3 times. He had left. He had gone somewhere else. He had tried again. And, apparently he had managed to stay. Something moved through her that she was not going to examine in this room, in front of this person. She reached for the anger, found it, wrapped it around herself. "Why are you telling me this, asterisk, because you're going to find out eventually, and you should hear it from someone who can tell it to you straight, asterisk, is that what you're doing, asterisk, trying to, asterisk." She looked at him. He was not flinching from her anger, not trying to manage it, not performing empathy. Just present with it. Available for whatever she needed to do with it. She hated, for a moment, how useful he was. "Does he know about me, asterisk?" she asked. "Does he know where I am, what I've become, what I know now?" Dorian was quiet for exactly 1 beat too long. "He knows you're here, asterisk," he said. "I told him." She stood up. "You told him, asterisk, yes, asterisk, without asking me, asterisk, yes. I should have asked. I made a judgment call that he had a right to know his daughter had come into her inheritance and into this world, and I stand behind it, and I also should have asked you first, asterisk, 2 apologies in 8 words. No qualification, no but, no, you have to understand." She had never in her adult life received an apology that arrived without luggage. She stood at the bookshelf with her hand on a spine, not reading it, just feeling the grain of it, because she needed to touch something solid and real. "What did he say, asterisk?" she asked. "He said he needed time to think, asterisk, of course he did." She removed her hand from the book. "I'm going home, asterisk," she said. "I know, asterisk, I'll be back, asterisk, I know that too, asterisk." She left. She drove home in the cold with the radio off and her hands precise on the wheel and her chest full of something that had no clean name for it, some compound thing made of grief and rage and something older than both of those, some need she had sewn into the lining of herself at 12 and had been wearing ever since. She came back. She kept coming back, and as the winter deepened the visits lengthened, and she began to stay through dinner, and then through the evenings, and she met more members of the court and learned the structures and the histories and the politics, and she found that her mind, which had always been a good mind, organized and quick and capable of holding contradictions, was built, in some structural way, for exactly this world. The night vision, the frequency sense, the speed and healing, these were the body's adaptations. But the mind was the real inheritance. The ability to read rooms, to understand what was subterranean in a conversation, to sit with an uncomfortable truth without needing to resolve it into something cleaner, that was her grandmother's blood, her grandfather's blood, whatever ancient careful thing had been living in her family line before she was born. She found herself, for the first time in her adult life, not performing competence. Just being it. Lena visited in January. Amara had not told her everything. There were things about the world she'd entered that were not her story to share fully, and Lena understood that the way Lena understood most things that mattered, by paying attention. But she had told her enough. And Lena had come for a weekend, and Amara had driven her out to the house, and Dorian had met them at the door with the courtesy of someone who knew this mattered to Amara and made no performance of it, and Lena had shaken his hand and then looked at Amara with an expression that Amara decoded immediately as "I see the problem." Later, on the drive back, Lena had said, "He's extraordinarily careful with you. He's careful with everyone." No, he's not. I watched him for 2 hours. He's not careful with Sophia. He's not careful with Marcus. He's careful with you. There's a distinction. Amara had watched the road. It's complicated. She had said. I know it is. Lena had said, without any drama. I'm just naming what I see. The complication had a specific event horizon, and it arrived on a Tuesday in February when Amara was at Voss Hall past midnight, which had become a regular thing, the night shift being her native hours and the house running on vampire time, and she was in the kitchen because she had discovered that despite running an ancient supernatural household, Dorian's kitchen had been chronically disorganized since a cook had left 6 months ago, and she had, on her third visit, silently reorganized the spice shelf, and it had escalated from there. She was making tea. She heard voices in the hall, Dorian and Marcus, the low register of something that was a real conversation, not administrative. She wasn't eavesdropping. She was in the kitchen. But the words carried because the house was old and the acoustics were what they were, and because she had, after all, very good hearing. Marcus was saying, needs to come here. The Western faction is asking questions about her. She needs to be formally presented. Dorian, she's not ready for that. She may not have the luxury of ready. If they find out she exists and came to us unofficially, it looks like she's being hidden. It looks like a weakness. She's not a political asset. To you she's not. To them she's something else. Adrian's daughter, unclaimed by her father's line, carrying blood rights she doesn't know the implications of. She's a variable. Variables get resolved. Silence. Then, Dorian, very quiet, no one resolves anything about her, the way he said it. Not loud, not heated, just absolute. The way you state a law of physics. Amara stood very still in the kitchen with the kettle in her hand. She thought, blood right, she thought, unclaimed, she thought about a girl of 12 sitting on stairs holding a stuffed rabbit named George and deciding everything was fine. She set the kettle down. She walked to the doorway of the hall. They both turned. Marcus with a guarded expression. Dorian with something that was not quite surprise. He had probably heard her moving, probably knew she'd heard, but something more complex than he usually wore on the surface. Tell me about blood right, she said. Marcus looked at Dorian. Dorian looked at Amara. Sit down, he said. I'd rather stand, he looked at her for a moment with the full weight of that attention, and then he sat down instead of her, pulling a chair from the hall table and sitting, so they were at eye level. So she was not being talked down to. She noticed that. She put it in the box. The box was getting full. He told her. Blood right in the vampire world was inheritance in the most literal possible sense. It was the sum of your lineage and what that lineage entitled you to, in terms of position, protection, and political standing. A Dhampir's blood right was complicated, contested by some factions and recognized by others. A quarter blood, which Amara was, could in theory carry it, but only if the primary line, the Dhampir, claimed it for them. Adrian had never claimed anything for her. Which meant she had walked into this world with blood right attached to her that no one had activated, like a bank account she couldn't access because she didn't know the password, and the primary account holder had gone to London and built a new family and had not, in 4 years of living within the same world she had now entered, thought to make a phone call. She stood in Dorian's hallway and felt all of this settle. And if I'm a variable that some faction decides to resolve, she said. What happens then? It doesn't happen, Dorian said. That's not an answer to the question, it's the only answer I'm prepared to give. She looked at him. The anger was there, reliable and warm. But, underneath it, for the first time, something else, something she usually handled by leaving rooms before it could be looked at. An awareness of him, specific and strange. Of the deliberateness with which he had situated himself below her eye line. Of the no one resolves anything about her she had heard from the kitchen. She was not going to name it in this hallway. I want to be presented, she said. Whatever that means, whatever the court protocol is, I want to do it. I don't want to be hidden and I don't want to be a variable. I want to walk in on my own feet, a breath. Marcus looking at the floor, very carefully not expressing anything. Dorian, after a moment, with something that was not quite relief but shared a neighborhood with it. All right, tell me what I need to know, I will. Not tonight, why not tonight because it's a great deal, and you've already had a great deal this evening, he stood. Come to the kitchen. You were making tea, she stared at him. You heard that, I hear everything in this house, then, I reorganized your spice shelf, I do. I've been meaning to thank you, the conversation had gone somewhere she hadn't expected and she was not entirely sure what to do with it. She turned and walked back to the kitchen. He followed, at a distance that was not intrusive, that was exactly the distance she needed. She made tea. He sat on the edge of the counter and watched the fire. The night outside the kitchen window was very dark and very quiet and the house was warm around both of them. She did not name it. But she stopped putting it in the box. The formal presentation took 3 weeks to prepare. In that time Amara learned things, the history of the court, the factions within the vampire world and what they wanted from each other and from the humans they lived adjacent to, the protocols and the language and what a quarter-blood's blood right could mean if properly established. She learned also, in increments, things about Dorian that he did not tell her directly but that she assembled from the house and the people in it and the small, careful details of how he moved through his own space. He had been king for a very long time. Long enough that the usual concerns of leadership, ego, appetite for power, the consolidation that comes from having everyone tell you you're right had been worn down to something more functional and less spectacular. He was not interested in being admired. He was interested in the court being stable and the people in it being alive, in both senses. He had a specific, low-key humor that appeared maybe twice a week and was all the more effective for its infrequency. He remembered details, not performatively, not as a social tactic, but genuinely, the way someone remembers things that matter to them. He remembered things about her. What she liked to eat. That she needed to walk when she was processing something difficult. That she was more comfortable with silence than most people and that the silence she gave when she was thinking was different from the silence she gave when she was uncomfortable, and he had learned, without being told, to leave the first alone and address the second. She was not used to being known like that. She had not known that she was not used to it until she was. There was a Thursday in the third week of preparation when they were sitting in the library and she had fallen asleep in the chair. The demands of still working night shifts at the hospital while spending most of her off hours here had caught up with her, and she had woken up to find a blanket over her and Dorian still at the table, reading. The fire built up. She had not said anything. He had not looked up. She had sat there for a few minutes in the warm room, in the middle of the night, and let herself feel something she had been managing around for months. It was nothing she was going to do anything about. It was something she was going to carry carefully and acknowledge to herself and put somewhere real instead of a box. That was progress. The night of the presentation came in March, cold and clear, the sky above the grounds of Voss Hall full of stars that were visible because they were 40 miles from the nearest city, and the darkness here was actual darkness, not the orange-gray of urban light pollution. Amara stood in the entry hall in a dress that Sophia had, through gritted courtesy, helped her choose. Dark green, fitted, nothing theatrical, the kind of thing that said I belong here without trying to say anything. She had her mother's bone structure and her father's stillness, which together produced an impression she had spent her life unaware of and was only now, from the way people in this world looked at her, beginning to understand. Dorian came to stand beside her before they went in. He looked at her. The full attention. "You don't have to do this tonight, he said. "I know I'll if at any point I'll walk out if I need to." "You'll know before I do, she paused. "You always know." Something moved in his face. "There and gone, like a light across water." "Yes, he said. "Is that strange?" "That you know, no why not, he was quiet for a moment. "Because I've been paying attention, she looked at the door. "Let's go, she walked in. He walked beside her, not in front, not trailing, beside. Equal and present. She felt the room before she saw the full shape of it, the frequency of 50-odd vampires, all old, all watching, a sound in the air like a held chord. She did not look for approval. She was not there for approval. She walked in with the anger that steadied her and the knowledge she had built, piece by piece, over months, and she was 22 and a quarter blood and nobody had claimed her blood right and she was done waiting to be claimed. She was doing it herself. The Vampire King stood at her left shoulder. The room went still. She lifted her chin, and she began. The presentation went the way most things went when Amara Cole walked into them prepared, not perfectly, but effectively. She had stood before the gathered court of Dorian Voss and spoken the traditional acknowledgement in the old language that Marcus had drilled her on for 3 evenings in a row, her pronunciation imperfect at the edges but correct at the core, and the assembled vampires had watched her with the careful, evaluating attention of people who have lived long enough to recognize something unusual and take their time deciding how to name it. There had been questions. Protocol required them. Amara answered cleanly and, without elaboration, she had learned, in this world as in nursing, that the shortest true answer was nearly always better than the comfortable one. A man named Cassius, old enough that his stillness had become absolute, had asked her about her father's line. She had said it was unrepresented, and that she was representing herself, and there had been a low murmur in the room that she couldn't fully read and Dorian, at her shoulder, had made a small, barely perceptible sound in his throat that she had come to understand meant hold. She held. She waited. Cassius had looked at her for a long time with eyes that had been old when the country she was born in didn't exist yet. Then, he had inclined his head. One by one, the rest followed. Not all. Sophia had kept her chin level and her expression careful and neutral. A few others she hadn't yet learned the names of had watched her with expressions that would need time to settle. But most had recognized, in that room, in that moment, what Amara Cole was, someone who had arrived on their own terms and was not going to be handled. Dorian had said nothing, standing at her shoulder, through any of it. He hadn't needed to. He had simply been there, in the way that mountains are simply there, without performance, without negotiation. Just massively, quietly present. After, when the formal part was over and the court had dispersed into smaller conversations and the kind of careful socializing that any political gathering produces, Dorian had brought her a glass of something and handed it to her without a word, and she had drunk half of it before she realized she'd stopped clenching her jaw. "You were extraordinary, he said. She looked at him over the rim of the glass. "You're going to make it weird, I'm being honest, you're always honest." "It doesn't make it less weird, she paused. Thank you. For standing there, where else would I be, it wasn't a question. She thought about that on the drive home that night, alone in her car with the county dark around her, the stars still out and the cold clean. Where else would I be? Like there was no other location he would consider. She had never had that. Someone whose location, when it mattered, was simply and absolutely beside her. She drove home. She called Clara. She told her mother she was okay, and, for the first time in a long time, the word okay was not a managed performance. It was just true. Spring came to Cincinnati and, to the grounds of Voss Hall in their different registers, the city doing it in fits and starts, early warmth followed by late cold, the trees blooming and, then, reconsidering. The house doing it in the way of old things that have seen too many springs to be surprised, steadily and, without comment, the grounds going green as if they'd simply been waiting for permission. Amara had begun staying at the house 3 or 4 nights a week, occupying a room that had been quietly prepared for her at some point she hadn't been told about, which she had noticed and not mentioned and then mentioned at a moment when Dorian was across the library from her and couldn't see her face. You had a room prepared, *, you were coming often enough to warrant it, *, you could have told me, *, I could have. You would have said it was fine and, then, thought about it for a week and, come to your own conclusion, *, she had opened her mouth and, then, closed it because that was exactly what would have happened. I don't like being predictable, *, she said. You're not predictable. You're consistent. There's a difference, *, she had gone back to her book. He had gone back to his work. The fire had done what fires do. It had been one of the best evenings she'd had in years, and she had only understood that later, lying in the quiet room in the dark, when she'd realized that she was entirely comfortable, entirely herself, and that both of those things were true at the same time in a way they rarely were. It was Marcus who told her, on a Wednesday in April, that Adrian was coming. She was in the hall near the kitchen. She had, by now, completed a full kitchen reorganization that had taken 3 visits and, which Eli had documented photographically for reasons Amara did not fully understand but found hard to object to, and Marcus found her there and said, with the directness she had come to appreciate in him, *, your father is traveling here. He'll arrive Friday, *, she put down the cup she was holding. He's coming here, *, yes. Dorian didn't arrange it. Adrian reached out on his own, a week ago. Dorian told him he could come, *, did Dorian tell me, *, a pause. He was going to tell you tonight. She looked at Marcus. He was not a man who flinched, but he was doing something adjacent to it, a careful neutrality that was the diplomatic version of bracing. Where is he, *, she asked. His study, *, she walked to the study. Dorian was at the desk when she came in, and he looked up immediately, and his expression told her that he already knew Marcus had told her, and she stood in the doorway with her arms loose at her sides and the full, specific anger of the last 10 years running very clean and very cold through her. You were going to tell me tonight, *, she said. Yes, *, he's been in touch for a week, *, yes, *, and you, *, I needed to understand what he wanted before I brought it to you. Whether this was *, he paused, choosing it carefully. * whether this was genuine or whether he was responding to the political reality of your presentation. Whether he's coming for you or coming because your blood right is now formally in the world and he has obligations attached to that, * she had not thought about that distinction. She thought about it now and it opened something uncomfortable, a new angle on a wound she'd thought she understood. Which is it, * she asked. I think both. I think he's not dishonest enough to pretend the politics aren't there. But, I think * he stopped. Tell me, * I think he's also scared. In the way of someone who made a choice they can't take back and have been living with the weight of it for 10 years, and now the thing they walked away from is standing in the world and looking like exactly who she was always going to be, and they don't know what to do with that, * she looked at the fire for a long time. That's very generous of you, * I'm not being generous. I'm describing what I see, * you think I should see him, * I think that's entirely your decision, *, but what do you think, * he looked at her with the full attention, the one that cost something. I think carrying a wound without information is harder than carrying a wound with it. I think you have questions only he can answer. I think you are someone who finishes things, and this isn't finished, * she was quiet. The anger was still there, but it was clarifying rather than blinding, the useful kind. The kind that meant she was paying attention. If he comes here and I fall apart, * you won't, * you don't know that, * I know you, * not said gently. Said factually. * you might fall apart after. But, not during. You're built for during, * she went to the window. Outside the grounds were going dark and the trees had their early April leaves, new green, the delicate kind before the summer toughens them. All right, * she said. Friday, Adrian Cole arrived on a Friday evening, just after sunset. Amara had spent the day at the hospital. She had not given up her shifts, she was not ready to. The night ER was still something that was hers independently, outside of everything, and she drove back to Voss Hall in the late light and saw a car she didn't recognize in the drive. She sat in her own car for 6 minutes. Exactly 6 minutes. She went inside. He was in the blue sitting room, the one at the far end of the ground floor that Amara had never paid much attention to because it faced the north garden and got the least light. He was standing at the window, his back to the room, and the posture was one she recognized in her bones, the window standing, the apartness, the quality of someone who was not quite in the room they're in. She stopped in the doorway. He turned. Adrian Cole was 46 years old and he looked 34, the Dhampir aging on its own schedule. He was still the face she remembered, the sharpness of him, the too still quality, the beautiful damage of it. He looked at his daughter and something happened in his expression that she had not seen there before. Something that cracked the control of it. He looked like he'd been punched. She thought, good. And then, she thought, that's not enough. That's not even close to a beginning. Amara, he said. Adrian, she said. His name in her mouth instead of Dad, she hadn't made that decision consciously, it had simply come out that way, and she watched him register it and say nothing about it. You look he started. Don't, she said. He stopped. She walked into the room and stood 10 feet from him and did not close that distance. You knew what I was, she said. From the beginning, yes, you knew I would start to manifest. You knew the world I was on the edge of, yes, and you left without telling me anything, yes, she waited. He said nothing else and she understood, with a clarity that was almost clinical, that he was not going to justify it. He was not going to give her a reason that made it okay, because there wasn't one, and he knew it. Why, she asked anyway. Because she needed to hear what he would say, not because she thought the answer would be good. He looked at the floor. Then, at her. He had his mother's hands, Clara's warmth and the build of them, even if they ran cold. Because I didn't know how to be what you needed. I'm not built the way humans are built. The way you need parents to be. Stable and warm and present, he said it without self-pity, just flat acknowledgement. Every time I thought I was doing it, I could feel the distance growing anyway. I thought you'd be better without the version of me that keeps leaving in increments, so you left completely, yes, that's one of the worst things I've ever heard, she said. He closed his eyes. I know, a child doesn't need a perfect parent. She needs a parent who stays. Who fails and stays. That's all I needed and you couldn't, she stopped. Started again. I made dinner when I was 11. I made dinner because Mom forgot to turn the stove on and I could see what was happening to her and I was scared for her and there was nobody. There was no one else. I was 11, I know, do you? Because if you knew, I failed you, he said it the way someone says I'm bleeding, not a confession, a fact. I failed you completely and I have been carrying that since the day I left, and I will carry it for the rest of my life, and none of that does anything for you. She stood in the quiet room. The anger was still there. It was not going anywhere. But, underneath it, the thing she had been locked away from for 10 years, the thing that lived in the room she'd closed at 12, it was there too. Grief. Real grief, the specific kind, the kind that is only possible when you loved what you lost. You don't grieve things that didn't matter. She had mattered to him. He had just been too broken by his own inherited damage to stay. None of that made it all right. Some things don't get to be all right. I have a brother, she said. He looked up. Theodore, she said it carefully. He's 8, yes, have you told him about me, no. Not yet. A pause. I didn't know how, start with the truth. It's not as complicated as you make it, he said nothing. She thought she saw his jaw move, like he was holding something. I'm not going to be your redemption story, she said. I'm not going to forgive you today, or maybe ever, and I need you to understand that's not something you get to manage or wait out. That's mine, she paused. But Theodore is 8 and he has a sister who is in this world, and he should know his sister exists. That's not about you and me. That's about a child who didn't choose any of this any more than I did, yes, Adrian said. You're right, I know I am, she walked to the door. She stopped. Don't come back to this house without asking me first. Asterisk not a question, not a suggestion. A line. Asterisk this is my place now. You don't just arrive here. Asterisk understood. Asterisk she walked out. She found Dorian in the library. He was standing at the window and he turned when she came in and he did not ask her how it went because he could read it from her face, and what her face needed right now was not to be asked to explain itself. She sat in the chair, her chair now, the one angled toward the fire, and put her head back and looked at the ceiling. He let her be quiet for a long time. She was not crying. She had told herself at 12 that she didn't have time for it, and she had been wrong about a lot of things, but she had been consistently wrong about that one. She cried. Not loud, not dramatic. Just the long overdue release of something that had been pressed behind glass for 10 years, the thing she'd been protecting Clara from and protecting herself from and protecting everyone around her from. She cried for the girl on the stairs with the stuffed rabbit. For the dinners she made at 11. For the birthday cards that stopped. For the $50 bill. For the distance that kept growing even when he was still there. For the fact that she had loved him. That she still, in some damaged and complicated corner of herself, loved him. Because you love what raised you even when what raised you hurts you, and you don't get to choose that, and it doesn't stop hurting just because you understand it. Dorian did not move from the window until she was done. Then, he moved his chair close to hers and sat in it and said nothing, and she did not have to be anything or perform anything or manage anything. She was just there. He was there. It was enough. What happened with Sophia came in May, and it came in the form of a political gambit that Amara had not seen coming and that Dorian later told her, with his characteristic flat honesty, that he should have anticipated. Sophia approached two of the Western faction's representatives, the faction Marcus had mentioned that winter evening, the one asking questions about Amara, and positioned Amara's formal entry into the court as a challenge to the existing hierarchy. She did it carefully, with the precision of someone who had been playing this game for centuries and understood that the most effective moves were the ones that didn't look like moves. She framed it as a concern about blood right irregularities, about a quarter blood with an unclaimed father line having access to the inner court without proper vetting by all parties. The Western faction called a formal inquiry. Amara found out about this from Eli, who told her over tea on a Monday morning with the expression of someone delivering news they would rather not have to deliver. Sophia has filed a challenge to your standing. It goes before the full council in 3 weeks. She put her tea down. A challenge to my standing. It's procedural, technically. She's framing it as a blood right verification issue. She's trying to have me removed. She's trying to have your status reviewed. Which could result in removal, or conditions, or is this about me or about Dorian? Eli looked at her with elderly precision. Both, she sat with that. Does Dorian know? He knows. He's Eli stopped. Tell me, he's angry. Very quietly. Which is, in my 400 years of knowing him, more concerning than loud. She went to find Dorian. He was in the training room at the back of the house, a space she'd been shown but hadn't spent much time in, used for the kind of physical training that vampires maintained as a matter of function rather than fitness. He was moving through something that was not quite a martial form, controlled and very fast, and when she came in he stopped immediately. She looked at him. You're managing this without me, she said. I'm handling a situation, a situation that is about me. That involves my standing in this court. And, you're in here doing she gestured. Whatever this is, alone, I didn't want to what, frighten you, she stared at him. I have been afraid of approximately nothing since I was 12, she said. That is not a thing you need to protect me from. He looked at her. Something in his expression was doing something she'd not seen it do before. He less controlled, less measured, the careful architecture of him under actual stress. You shouldn't have to fight for your place here, he said. You walked in here and did everything right and you shouldn't have to stand in front of a council and justify Dorian, he stopped. I have been justifying my existence since before I knew what I was justifying it as, she said it simply, without anger. I can do this. I need you to let me do it and be beside me when I do, not in front of me, asterisk. He was quiet for a moment. You said that to me once before, asterisk, in the presentation. Yes. I mean it the same way now, asterisk. He came to where she was standing. He was close, closer than the distances they usually managed, and she was aware of it with the part of her that had stopped putting things in boxes, the part that had been growing loud and specific since January. I'm not good at not being in front of things, asterisk, he said. When things matter, I know, asterisk. She looked at him. I'm one of the things that matters, yes, asterisk. Then, be beside me. Not in front, asterisk. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across his face, something old and real and not managed at all. All right, asterisk, he said. The council inquiry took place in the third week of May, and Amara walked in prepared in the way she had learned to prepare for things that mattered, not just the information, not just the protocol, but the whole self, every layer of it armored and present and ready. Sophia was there, beautiful and controlled, presenting her case with the elegant composure of someone who expected to win. The Western faction's representatives listened with their ancient careful faces. The council chair, a woman named Ingrid who was so old she had a stillness that made Dorian look energetic by comparison, presided with a neutrality that revealed nothing. Amara spoke for herself. She did not perform. She did not seek approval. She did not minimize or soften or preface her words with apologies for taking up space. She laid out the truth of what she was, where she came from, what she had done since entering the court, and what she intended to do going forward. When Sophia's representation raised the blood right issue, the unclaimed father line, the irregularity, Amara looked at Sophia directly and said, asterisk, my father's line is his to manage or not manage as he chooses. My blood right is mine. I am claiming it, as I am entitled to, for myself. The line stops at me, by my choice, and starts again at me, by my right. If there is a blood right irregularity here, it is one I am resolving, right now, in front of this council, by being here and speaking for myself. Asterisk. Ingrid looked at her. 400 years of looking at people in a room. And what do you intend for this court? Asterisk. She asked. To be useful, asterisk. Amara said. Asterisk. I'm a nurse. I understand what it means to be in a system that is sometimes failing and to be the person who knows how to stabilize it. I am not here to claim territory or to contest anyone's position. I'm here because this is half of what I am, and I was kept from it for 22 years, and I am done being kept from anything that belongs to me. Asterisk. The room was very quiet. Ingrid turned to Sophia. Sophia's expression was contained and perfect. The challenge is procedurally valid, asterisk. Ingrid said. Asterisk. And procedurally answered. The quarter-blood standing is recognized, asterisk. She looked back at Amara. Asterisk. Full standing. No conditions, asterisk. After, in the corridor, Dorian found her before anyone else could. He did not say I told you so, he did not say well done or any of the things that would have made the moment smaller than it was. He said, come outside. She followed him out through a side door to the grounds, the May evening warm and dark, the stars doing their thing above the old trees. They walked until the lights from the house were behind them, the sound of the gathering inside distant and small. They stopped at a place where the grounds opened up into a wide lawn that ran down to a low stone wall with the countryside beyond it. She stood and breathed the night air and let the last 2 hours move through her and settle. She'll try again, asterisk. Amara said. Sophia, yes. In a different form, with different grounds. That's who she is, asterisk. And you'll let me handle it, asterisk. Beside you, asterisk. Beside me, asterisk. She looked at him. He was looking at the dark over the wall, the wide open of it. Can I ask you something, asterisk? She said. Yes, asterisk. Why does it matter to you? Really? Not the politics, not the blood right, me, specifically. You could have sent Marcus to tell me what I was. You could have sent the information and a contact and left the door open. You didn't have to do any of this yourself, asterisk. He was quiet. The night was very quiet too. Because I knew what it was to grow up on the edge of something you belonged to without being let in, asterisk. He said. Not looking at her. At the dark. Asterisk. I had the right context for it. I had seen what it produces, in people who aren't built the way you are, and I thought if someone had been beside them. If someone had just been present. I thought it could be different, you've been doing this for other people, not in the same way, he turned to look at her. Not in the same way, she looked at him. The full attention, the one that cost something. She had learned that it cost him too, not just to receive but to give. He was careful with it for a reason. I have not been happy in quite a long time, he said. I should be precise about that. I am not unhappy. I am functional and purposeful, and I have this court and the people in it, and that is substantial. But you asked me what you specifically mean, and I am trying to answer honestly, okay, you came here on your own. You pushed every door I left slightly open. You reorganized my kitchen, something moved at the corner of his mouth. You sat in a council room today and spoke for yourself as if there was never a question that you would, and there wasn't, but some people don't know that about themselves, and you always have. You are what happens when no one helps you become something, and you become it anyway, a pause. You remind me that things can persist and come out the other side shaped rather than destroyed. She stood very still in the warm May dark. That's the most you've ever said at once, she said. Yes, it was good, thank you, she turned toward him. He was right there, the careful distance of the last 6 months dissolved or resolving, and she had been waiting, not passively, not unconsciously, but waiting the way you wait when you know you need to be sure, and then you are, when the right moment surfaces, for this specific nearness. I'm going to be complicated, she said. I have a locked room in me that I'm still working on opening. I have a father I may never fully forgive. I have a career and a life in Cincinnati and a best friend who is already insufferably right about everything, and if she's right about this too I will never hear the end of it, what is she right about, Amara looked at him. He already knew. She could see that he already knew and was asking because he wanted her to say it. She says you're extraordinarily careful with me, she's correct, she says there's a distinction between how you are with everyone else and how you are with me, she's correct about that too, are you going to keep being careful, yes, even after, especially after, he said it quietly. Amara. I have been watching you become yourself for 8 months. I am not going anywhere, where else would you be, she said. The same words he'd said to her in November, given back. Exactly, she closed the remaining distance. The summer came in full and the grounds of Vauxhall were, for the first time in a while, loud with something other than politics. Amara had reduced her hospital shifts to 2 nights a week, not because she was giving it up, she wasn't, she was clear about that, it was hers, but because there was enough happening here to make the other nights necessary. She continued the conversations with Adrian. Slowly, on her terms, at the pace she set. He came to the house when she invited him, which was not often, and they talked with the careful honesty of two people who are related and damaged in overlapping ways and are trying to figure out what, if anything, they can be to each other now. He told her about Theodore. He sent photographs. She looked at them for a long time, a small boy, her coloring, her father's hands. Her half-brother who did not know she existed yet. She was not ready to meet him. She was getting ready. She called Clara every Sunday, as always. She had told her mother something of what had happened, not everything, the world was not hers to explain fully, but enough. Clara had been quiet for a long time and, then, had said, "Are you safe? Yes, are you happy? She had looked out her window at the grounds of Vauxhall in late June evening, the long light, the trees. I think so. I think that's what this is, Clara had made a sound that was half laugh and half something else entirely. Good, she said. That's all I ever wanted for you. Lena came for a full week in July and was insufferably, mercilessly, lovingly right about everything. She sat on the kitchen counter while Amara made dinner and said, "He looks at you like you're a problem he's incredibly glad to have," and Amara had said Lena, and Lena had said "I'm just reporting what I see," and Eli had appeared in the kitchen doorway at that exact moment and said "she's absolutely correct," and then disappeared again, and Amara had stood there with a wooden spoon in her hand and felt not the carefully managed fine, not the performance of it, just the real thing. Happy. The word fit. In August, on the last evening before Lena left, Amara sat on the stone wall at the edge of the grounds with the summer dark around her and the countryside beyond, and Dorian sat beside her, and they didn't talk for a while because they were in the stage of being with each other where silence had become comfortable in the way it is only with people you fully trust. She thought about a girl on stairs at midnight with a stuffed rabbit, deciding things were fine. She thought about birthday cards with horses on them for no reason. She thought about cool hands on a warm day. She thought about Lena's voice on a Sunday call. Go back. Obviously she thought about a cream envelope in a third-floor mailbox. The choice is yours, the choice had always been hers. She had made it, over and over, since November, coming back, going in, standing up, speaking up, crying in a library chair, walking toward instead of away. She thought about Dorian, beside her on this wall the way he had been beside her in every room since the day she arrived, the way she now understood he intended to be. I stopped being fine a while ago, she said. He looked at her. Fine was the thing I said when I meant the other word and couldn't say it, what's the other word, she looked at him. The dark eyes, no silver ring. The face that had been shaped rather than worn down by time. Present, she said. I stopped pretending I was fine and I started being present. In my own life. In this she gestured at the air between them, at the house behind them, at the whole complicated strange wonderful fact of it. It's different, yes, my father walked away, she said. And, you didn't make it better. You can't make it better. Nobody can make 10 years of that better. But, you she paused. You made the next part possible. You stood at the door and, you told me the choice was mine and, you meant it, and, you've been meaning it every day since, he was quiet. I vowed something to myself, he said. When I first understood what had happened with your father. What you'd been left without. I vowed that if you came here, if you chose this, I would make certain that nothing about you went unseen again. Nothing about what you are, what you carry, what you can do, he looked at the dark countryside. I made that vow before I knew who you were, exactly. Before I knew about the wooden spoon and the track records and the spice shelf, she laughed, short and real. And, now that you know those things, now that I know those things, he said, it is a considerably easier vow to keep. She leaned into him, and he put his arm around her, and the summer night held still around them, warm and very quiet. She was 22 years old. She was the daughter of a man who had not known how to stay, and the granddaughter of something ancient and complicated, and she was a nurse on the night shift and a woman who had reorganized a 500-year-old kitchen and the person the vampire king had chosen to be careful with. She was not fine. She was, at last, something better than fine. She was home. Lena, on the drive to the airport the next morning, said, so. Happy shut up I'm right and, you know it you've always been right. It's a deeply annoying quality and, I need you to develop at least one flaw I have many flaws, name one Lena considered this for a long, dignified moment. I am chronically right about things, she said. It's burdensome, Amara laughed. All the way. The kind Clara used to do, before, with her whole body. She drove Lena to the airport and hugged her goodbye and drove back to the house in the August morning, the light coming down gold through the old trees on the drive. The front door was open. Boots by the step. The smell of coffee from the kitchen. She walked in.